You're here for season 7 of the Whole Horse Podcast, now at 110 episodes and counting. I'm your host, Alexa Linton, coming to you from Vancouver Island in Canada. I can't wait to continue to share thought-provoking, edge-pushing, geeky, and often challenging conversations with horse professionals from all areas of our industry who are working to make horses' lives better. This season, you can look forward to more on the specifics of creating enriching, healthy horse spaces, an area I'm particularly passionate about. I'm so excited that you're here listening in, meeting great horsey humans, and hopefully learning a new thing or two about horses and yourself. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. You're here for the Whole Horse Podcast, and we're marching along in season 7 with just an amazing group of guests this year. Our guest today, very, very much included. We're just sharing that I think it's been like 16 or 17 years since we last connected, although I definitely keep watching out for what you're doing, and you've done absolutely amazing things over the years. So I'm so pleased to be introducing you all to Lauren Fraser, who is a clinical animal behaviorist. She lives actually not far as the crow flies in Squamish, BC. We seem to all kind of be congregating around here. And Lauren, I'm so glad you're here on the podcast today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Alexa. Thank you for that warm welcome and that introduction and for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's chat horses and behavior and all the good stuff.
My favorites. Let's do it.
Right? So I know that. So one of the things that I've been using as a term for a while now is the concept of the 3 F's. So the freedom, forage, friends, and I just want to get into, because I believe this was something that you actually came up with, started in a way, and I just want to get into how that developed. What was that process for you?
Yeah, sure. That awesome question. Yeah, the 3 F's started. I wrote a series of blog posts for an organization called the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants. And those blogs were called The Horse's Manifesto. And it was basically a way to summarize what we can think of as the horse's primary needs. So friends, forage, and freedom. And I had them in that order because we know from research that friends are most important to horses. You know, they would actually choose to be with other horses rather than eat. So they're kind of front and center, the friends. And then we know that horses are trickle feeders. You know, their stomach's only about the size of a small to medium-sized pumpkin, and it empties relatively quickly. So it needs to continually be putting forage into it. So that forage part comes second. And then the freedom part is not just the freedom to move, but also to engage freely in a wide range of species typical behaviors. So thinking about when we see horses living under more natural conditions, thinking about all the different things that they can get up to in a day and how rich their lives are. So thinking about those 3 F's and how we might try to make sure that those are really important in our horses' lives when we manage horses. So trying to set up situations where ideally the horse has full-time access to all 3.
Yeah. And here on the West Coast, as you and I both know, horse keeping is ishy in terms of these 3 F's, I would say. Mm-hmm. You know, being a body worker for years, going into many barns, and you would be doing the same. Very often, we're really not getting any of those needs met for a lot of horses. I hope and pray and I'm dreaming of a time where that changes. I would love to know for you, like, what would an ideal, let's say West Coast, because here we are, you know, we're in sort of a rainforest climate, it's wet, it's, you know, it's different from perhaps other places, but similar. What would be the ideal horse keeping situation for you that you would be looking for, say, if you went out to do a consultation, you know, or worked with a horse? Like, is there such a thing as that being here?
Yeah, and that's an awesome question. And I love how you talked about here on the West Coast, because we have our own unique challenges, you know, as you're well aware too. I'm someone who's pretty middle ground on lots of things. So I don't want people to get the impression that I feel that horses can't be happy without what some might consider a gold standard.
Yeah.
So, let's say, for example, that gold standard is living on 1,000 acres with, a herd of other horses of different ages and sexes and things like that, and having free access to forage all the time. Some people might say that that's the gold standard and anything less than that is harmful, but that's not necessarily true, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm thinking about the 3 F's, it's not that I expect all of my clients, or you should expect all of your clients, to attain that level of horsey nirvana, because it's just frankly not possible for lots of horses, right? And lots of people. So, but still keeping those 3 F's in mind, and, ensuring that at minimum, horses can always see other horses.
Mhm.
Ideally, they're in contact with other horses and they can touch other horses, that we are feeding them in ways that they have the ability to trickle feed on food. So like slow feeding hay nets and an appropriate forage. So consulting with a nutritionist to make sure that we've got something that horse can eat without negatively affecting their weight, whether that's gaining too much weight or losing weight. For example, I have an Iberian horse and she gets a mixture of hay and straw.
Yeah.
So otherwise, she would be exposed to periods of fasting throughout the day, and that would be really physically and psychologically difficult for her. So a part of her ration is straw. She still gets to chew and ingest food, but it's just something that's really low calorie and not as nutrient dense. And then thinking about, getting creative with how we manage horses so that they have the ability to engage in normal behavior. So they have the ability to move around as much as possible. So making sure that they have access to lots of turnout, even if they might have to be in like a stall and paddock overnight, making sure they're getting daily turnout, making sure they're getting adequate exercise, whether that's we're riding them or doing other activities with them. Making sure that their environment is enriched enough in that they can do different things. So they're not just turned out into a boring square paddock with nothing in it, but there might be some trees or some branches or some different objects, or whether we're providing that enrichment in that we're going out and doing little food scatters or whatever it is we're doing throughout the day, so that they can just engage in normal behaviors and be horses. They can search for things and forage, they can play with others, they can run, they can buck, they can fart, they can get dirty. I don't think enough people let their horses get dirty and roll and engage in those self-maintenance behaviors. So things like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I, I'm really coming to this place of realizing that, like you said, we don't need to all be hitting like that gold standard of it must be like this to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've been really, really sitting with, okay, what are the small steps that someone might be able to take to, you know, create enrichment in their horse's environment, create more things that are interesting for them. Like you say, it can be something as simple as like adding branches to their paddock or things to walk over, a little sand pile or,
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah, totally.
Hmm.
Totally. Different things so that they can just do more things other than just stand in a boring, unenriched paddock. That's not really helping them in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this leads me to sort of really wanting to unpack what you see as the relationship, and I know this is a huge question, but the relationship between equine behavior and equine environments. Does that intersection happen? So when you're seeing sort of what we might call or label, shall we say, not great behavior in horses,
Mm-hmm.
at what point do you go, oh yeah, this is an environmental thing going on?
Yeah, awesome, awesome question. So when I'm doing consults, I'm not just looking at the behavior problem itself, but I'm also looking at what's the horse's day like? What do they do in a given day? What's their time budget? How much time do they spend, engaging in eating behaviors and sleeping behaviors and all of those normal behaviors? And when we're thinking about those 3 F's and the horse's environment and how that might affect their behavior, when we expose horses to situations where they have deficits in one or more of those 3 F's, we can absolutely see behavior problems develop. For example, friends, if a horse doesn't have the ability to freely engage with other horses, it causes them real psychological distress. And certainly horses can be taught to tolerate separation from other horses, but they're not going to necessarily thrive when they're living under those conditions. Just like us, we're a social animal as well, and we don't thrive in solitary confinement. We don't thrive without connection. We don't thrive without the ability to engage socially with members of our own kind. So when we're putting horses in situations where they don't have the ability to engage socially, we often see signs of stress, or they might become hyper vigilant because now they're alone and they're feeling anxious because there's not a group of horses to rely on that safety. They might then try to even, let's say, play with us because they don't have an outlet. They don't have that ability to play with other horses. And, that can be inappropriate because they're quite big and we're quite small and fragile.
Yeah.
So lots of things can happen. We can see them develop extreme distress when they're separated from others, where they panic and they run and they call, or even injure themselves when they're taken away or when another horse is taken away. So lots of problems can happen with that. With forage as well, when we're not feeding horses appropriately and we're not allowing them to trickle feed, and they're exposed to periods of fasting, not only is it physically uncomfortable for them to do that, they've got a buildup of stomach acid and they're not getting that saliva that only comes from chewing, which is help buffering that stomach acid. It's also psychologically really distressful for them. You and I eat 3 to 5 meals a day, and we eat a meal and then we fast for an extended period of time, and that's normal for us, but it's not normal for the horse, and it does cause them distress. So we might see things like aggression at feeding time. We might see horses who pin their ears when a person approaches, especially with high value foods like grains. Or they might start displaying aggression towards other horses because they feel they need to guard that resource of food because they feel that food is in limited supply. So we can start to see those kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And with
Mm-hmm.
the last one, freedom, the less ability the horse has to engage in a wide range of normal behaviors, the more likely we're going to see problems. So not just locomotion, not just movement, but even just, again, rolling on the ground and scratching themselves, or, investigating or traveling a distance and, finding resources and things like that. It physically, they're doing things with their body, but mentally they're also using their brains in those situations. And just like us, when we are understimulated, we can get quite stressed out and uncomfortable and anxious as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing to just get that reflection on, what we might be experiencing from our horses being related to these deficiencies and in these areas. And on that note, I guess I want to sort of bring in this piece around, I guess we could call it human behavior. But one thing that I've seen is that as humans, we tend to like to control things.
You think?
Just a little bit. We like to control things, and that can show up in a myriad of ways, including really actually sort of heading us in the opposite direction than meeting the needs of these three F's, I would say. Right. So there's the human control that's like, I can't turn my horse out with other horses because they're going to get hurt. There's the human control that can't let my horse have a bigger amount of space and run because, oh my gosh, they might injure themselves or something might happen. Oh, I can't let them have, 24/7 forage or access because they're going to get fat or laminitic or whatever it is. Right. So there's the fear leading to control, leading to a restriction, I would say, of their species specific needs actually being met. How do you handle this kind of tricky zone of helping the people to find their way to a space that they can start to allow their horse to be a horse?
Oh, I love that you touched on that fear that often drives need to control, right? Because when we're trying to control things, it's often because we're frightened. We're frightened of loss. We're frightened of,
Yeah.
something bad happening. So we try to control situations. And So when I'm working with people, I think it's really important. It's funny, I see sometimes people post, on social media that I love working with animals, but I hate working with people. And I'm like, okay, people are animals too. And,
Yeah.
you know, I find that most people are just trying to do right by their horses. So they're doing these things because they often have evidence that their fear is going to come true. So when we inhibit horses from moving, when we confine them,
Yep.
what happens is we often see what's called post-inhibitory rebound, which means that we let them out and they go crazy. They run around like absolute jackasses. They buck and they fart and they hurt themselves,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So right there, the person has real hard evidence that turnout causes injuries. Okay. But what we're forgetting here is it's that lack of turnout that's leading to that huge over the top expression pendulum swing from the horse because they finally got out and they're going to go crazy, right? So I think approaching people with that same approach that I have with the horses, that we got to be kind, we got to see things from this animal's experience, and from the person's experience they have total justification for wanting to control their horse and not put them in those situations because they don't want their horse to get hurt. So approaching it with that mindset and just being kind and trying to help the person see that the animal might be having a little bit of a different experience.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about the relationship that people have with horses as well, of course, we're all going to have different relationships with horses. But historically, when we think about the relationship we have with horses, it's often that horses are in part an owned object. And often,
Yes.
often we pay a lot of money for that object. So what comes along with that is feelings of ownership and feelings of, again, having a control over what happens to that investment. So, sometimes with that control comes that fear of losing that financial investment, or having that financial investment cost you even more money, or cost you in the way of not being able to do what it is you want to do with that animal. And, it might not be appropriate to get into that kind of
Oh, let's go there.
I don't know how far down that rabbit hole we want to go, but that is a mindset that is prevalent in the horse world,
Yep.
and it's something that we often come up against, is that the relationship that people have with horses can be very different to that we have with our companion animals like dogs, where
Yeah.
trend is to see dogs less as an owned object and to see them more as a friend, or even a dependent like a child. And a lot of people don't have that relationship with their horse. And I'm not going to pass judgment on whether that's good or bad. It just is. But
Yeah.
there still is more of that approach towards horses than there is to our companion animals.
Oh, that's just such a great point. I just, as soon as you named that, I was like, oh yeah, okay, right. Because I think even for those of us that are like, no, 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 that's not how I am. If we really kind of got down deep and examined that there is, okay, like where in me is it like you said, I need to protect my investment. I've put a lot of time and energy and money. It's expensive to fix this thing. And that drives certain ways of horsekeeping, of our behavior when it comes to how we decide to caretake, create environments, or allow our horses to have a more horse-like life, essentially.
Totally. And when we're coming at it from that perspective, and again, no judgment, but when we're coming from it from that place of viewing horses as an investment, even though we like them, we like them and we enjoy their
Yeah.
company stuff, we still kind of have those feelings about them being an investment. We sometimes also view them through the lens of our own desires and our own wants. So, for example, blanketing, we might look at the horse and say, there's no way in hell that horse wants to be naked when it's 12 degrees out and not raining. They need a puffy coat, or, if the person themselves doesn't like to engage in boisterous type of play or high risk play, they might then pass that on to what they perceive to be their horse's needs as well. You know, they might project those same wants and desires as well. So I think that's something that we also need to be mindful about when we're keeping an animal like the horse, is trying to view things, and it's really hard, and I don't know if it's totally possible, but trying to view things through the lens of what that individual might want, you know.
Yeah.
We can't ever fully experience what it is to be a horse, but you know, using those guides of what do they do as a species as our guide to help us make decisions about things like how we care for them.
Yes. Yes. I hear it a lot where people are like, oh, my horses really, they just love being all blanketed up, or they like to be tucked away in their stall, or, that sort of thing where it's sort of, and I have to say, like, I've been guilty of this as well, right? Like, absolutely, where we project a little bit onto our horse, like what we would like, yeah, I love my cozy bed, I love being snuggled and warm, all those things are important to me, but not so much for our horses. So I
Yeah.
guess my question is, when we think of something like equine behavior, or we're watching how a horse is interacting in a space, or how behavior is coming forward, when someone says, oh, my horse just loves this, my horse is so happy with such and such thing, where do you see kind of, is there the thing like tells in the environment that the horse is like, actually, like, I'm not, even with tack, we see this, right? Where, oh, they love their martingale, or they're so great. They're so happy in this double bridle, or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
not to say any of that, like, I'm not judging anything, but I sort of will look at a photo and go, well, that eye is pretty worried. There's definitely tension in the face. Like, I'm not seeing necessarily what this person is seeing as far as like a happy creature, right?
Totally, totally. Really well said. When we're thinking about looking at those situations where we think we might think that a horse loves something, it's nice to look at what are called the horse's arousal level and their affective state. And arousal level is just alertness or awakeness, for lack of a better word. So, you know, from standing calmly and dozing, you know, with a leg cocked, half asleep, to, let's say, running and bucking, like full expression, ultimate arousal level, right?
Yeah.
And then affective states are emotional states. So, and those would be, you know, from a negative emotional state to a positive one. And often when horses are doing things like, let's say, let's pick a sport, barrel racing. And they're saying, my horse loves barrel racing because look at how excited he is in the alley. But when we look at that horse, we're seeing a super high level
Yeah.
of arousal, right? People often misinterpret that level of arousal and that eagerness to move forward as something that has a positive emotion attached to it. But if we look closely at the horse's behavior, we might see signs that indicate that horse is actually feeling stressed in that
Yeah.
situation. So they can feel stressed and be highly aroused and be doing the thing that it is we're asking them to do, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily love it or that they're having a good time with it. They may have just learned that the quicker they get it over with, the quicker they feel better, right?
Yeah.
So it can be really hard to objectively look at horse behavior, particularly when we start to realize that, you know, what we think was happening might not be what's actually happening. And initially, I know my kind of light bulb moment for that, it can be painful, right? We can be like, holy crap,
Oh,
I was misreading this situation all along, and my horse doesn't actually love it. And that first time we learn that, it can kind of not feel good, right? Understandably. But I think that once we do start to learn to be able to see those things, it can be really liberating and empowering for us so that we can better provide care for our horses and make decisions on, you know, what might be best for them.
yeah. I think that there's this interesting place, and I mean, I want to come back around to that, the conversation around horse as potential object, whether
Mm.
we're conscious of that or not. I think that, we come from generations upon generations upon generations where horses were, shall we say, in a role that really, I think, would lead easily into them being seen in that way, right? So whether they were plowing a field or getting us from A to B, like, speaking generations and generations back, or fighting in a war, or doing these things, there is a kind of different way of thinking that way, I think, with our horses, that's sort of a bit built into deeper, maybe systemic mindsets that we don't necessarily even have full awareness of. Would that,
Yeah. Yeah, that
you
makes
know,
that makes complete sense and really well said. And we're not aware of it. And let's be frank, we used to use horses in a way that we were literally dependent on their
yeah,
survival. So we needed them to survive. And if we look at the history of humanity, we would not be where we are today without horses. We've capitalized on their strength and their power. We've used their muscular abilities and their speed to win battles and plow fields, and we've eaten them and drank their milk and used their hides. Like, we have literally used horses to succeed and get where we are today. So that's how many countless generations of that messaging on us, that they are something for our use.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So this leads me to a question. In one part, I want to get back to that piece around the example that you gave, or a horse being turned out. The fool around vibe comes up, and they're racing around the field, and they injure themselves potentially, and it leads to this kind of like an affirmation of that person's fear, need to control.
Mm-hmm.
In those kind of scenarios, and we're going to get shortly into, when you're out working in a client barn and doing consults,
Mm-hmm.
in those kind of scenarios, what would be your advice for that person? What would be the baby steps or the stepping stones to allow them to actually move to a place where their horse can be safe with that freedom aspect, and they can feel potentially safer and safer and safer to give that to them?
Yeah, yeah. Often I find that sharing personal experiences can be helpful. So saying, I totally understand why you feel like that. I used to feel that way too. And then I learned this can be really helpful. And I also sometimes use the strategy of saying, let's try this experiment. Like,
Yep.
let's try this experiment that we're going to set up that's going to be really low risk. So the likelihood that your horse is going to be injured is low. So that might mean that initially we're turning your horse out in a smaller location where they can't build up too much steam and hurt themselves. And let's do that for 5 days in a row. Then let's put them in a slightly bigger location, and so on. And let's keep a diary. Let's get some data, right? We're
Yep.
junior scientists here. And let's see if what we're doing is making the situation better, worse, or the same. So the situation being your horse's behavior when they go out. Are they running around like a fool in bunny rabbit
Yep.
ears?
Yeah.
Or is that happening less and less? So sometimes just giving the person kind of permission to run that experiment in a really low risk way can be helpful. I used to, when I first started doing this work, like try to throw research at them and be like, look at this study that shows that horses who are turned out have fewer incidents and stuff like that. And sometimes that can be helpful, but I think people really want to learn from their own direct experience a lot of the
Yes.
time. So helping them run their own little mini experiments and to find that information can be really good.
I love that, because I do think for a lot of humans that fear prevents them from maybe taking any steps forward, particularly. And oftentimes, rather than the answer being, let's just, turn
Rip off the
everybody out
Band-Aid.
and
Yeah,
pull the fences down, and
totally.
like that's
Totally.
not the answer, because I mean,
No.
so much stress. And also the horses, I've experienced clients where, because they've been in such a restricted, restrained environment for so long, it's actually quite challenging for them to start to, like, they need time to simmer in the shifts and changes, right? Just like any of us
1,000%,
mammals,
Alexa.
right?
1,000%. So well said.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
dumping them into this massive, it's another type of flooding in some ways, right? For
Yeah.
especially for certain horses. The one that comes to mind is was a Grand Prix dressage horse, and he was very used to his stall, very used to his blankets. These were had become, shall we say, his comfort zones,
Yeah,
right?
I sadly refer often to those horses as being institutionalized.
Yeah.
They've been living in these conditions that are not great for horses and that can lead to some pretty, extreme behavioral states and things like that. And ripping off that band-aid and like kumbaya, just turning them out and letting them be free with all the other horses, that could actually be the worst thing possible for that individual horse because it would be complete overwhelm. It would
Mhm.
be, we might think we're being kind and giving that horse instant 3Fs, but it might actually even be more harmful. So taking a more nuanced approach where we're considering that horse's history and like how long have they been kept like this, and then, doing it in a more gradual way for that individual, because we're all individuals, the horses too. Yeah.
Yeah. And you do see the other side of the coin. I've been witness to the other side of the coin where it's like a horse that's lived in that way for years and then they're turned out in a field with a bunch of other horses and they're like, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah,
It's like,
totally. Totally.
okay, okay, cool.
100%. Yeah, 100%, right? Yeah, definitely.
And I love that the distinction or the nuances of the nervous system, right? Like
Mhm, mhm.
really, I think this is the beauty of knowing your horse on a deep level. Would you say is that sense that just like human beings, some are just all about change. Like you see these people that jump on a plane, go to a different country, across the world with a backpack, don't know the language, and they're just like, yes, the
Yes,
best thing ever, right?
totally.
And then there's like others where it's like, okay, like I need to have everything planned.
That would
It's
be
gonna
traumatizing. So
like it
traumatizing.
has to be just so
Exactly. Yeah.
right. So these different nervous systems that are kind of directing us perhaps to like what the best thing for that individual horse is going to be in terms of hopefully bringing more of these good things into their life in a way that works really well for them. Hey.
Yeah, totally. And, thinking about those horses, going back to the 3Fs, if we're dealing with horses that have been brought up in conditions that have had a deficit in one or more of the 3Fs, it can be, especially when it relates to friends, it can be really hard, if not impossible, to make that horse be comfortable with having friends because
Yeah.
we know from research where when we deprive an animal of social opportunities during critical developmental
Yep.
periods, they will often be at a disadvantage for life in regards to things like socialization. So learning how or being able to get along with members of the same species. And so it can be really harmful to them. And again, going back to that evidence that the people have, if we've got a horse who did not have access to other horses growing up, they might have just had their dam and then they were subjected to premature
Yep.
weaning at 4 to 6 months of age, which is industry standard.
Yep.
Then they were socially isolated because they were physically or financially valuable. Then that horse is always going to struggle with having normal social relationships with others. And so again, it could be not fair at all just to expect that horse to be able to, you know, get their backpack on and go on a plane and go live in another country, right? Like to
Yeah.
to go out in the herd on 100 acres with other horses might just be horrible for them and it might not be fair to them, frankly.
Yeah. And this has been a big question for me over, I've had a number of guests where I've asked this question because I'm so genuinely curious because for me, I just see that friends is the thing. Friends is the pinnacle, like you said, of enrichment and goodness when it comes to horses. And yet I also see this other side that you're speaking of right now, which is that there is many horses that were weaned early and then isolated and did not get the social interaction that would allow them to necessarily be an instant success out in a herd.
Yeah, yeah.
So my question is perhaps for those particular horses and maybe some that are sort of in that zone, right? Because some of those horses amaze us and then they're just like totally fun, again, unique unique nervous systems and they're just like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
cool. But others I've seen where it can be really, really challenging for them to interact, to integrate in a good way, a healthy way. For you, what have you seen can be supportive for those particular horses? You know, for all horses, but in particular these ones that would obviously benefit greatly from social connection, but really have a challenging time with it.
And that's a tricky question because often when we're thinking about keeping horses, we are not in positions where we own the property and we
Yep.
can control the comings and goings of all the horses. So, thinking about situations like where you and I are in boarding situations, all of that is out of our control. And so what then can we do to help that horse, when we can't say, okay, that horse A and horse B are pair bonded now, horse B can never leave. Well, we don't own horse B, and horse B might get sold next week, right?
Yep.
And now we've got a horse who's going to be really distressed because B is gone. So thinking about again that individual and their needs, I think, at minimum for these horses who have experienced a real deficit in socialization early on, at minimum still being able to see other horses, and
Yep.
ideally horses that when they're able to see them, that they're not caused to feel stress, so they're not showing that they're uncomfortable with that horse's proximity, that that horse is at a distance where they can look at the horse and not feel any bad feelings. Ideally they would have a shared fence line with
Yep.
other horses, again at minimum would be great, and someone compatible with that they can, if they want to, mutually groom over the fence or play those gelding games, as some horses do. And again, it can be tricky in those situations where we don't have control over who the horse's neighbors are, or when those horses come and go. What can be helpful too is just taking horses for hand walks around the property and being near other horses where our horses aren't showing negative reactions,
Mm-hmm.
So going and grazing in the proximity of another horse who's really calm and relaxed, you're still allowing them to be near other horses, or you're still facilitating that, but not in a way that's causing them distress. That can still be something that could be helpful.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that with, say, that type of horse, there is potential, say I had my own property and I took in a horse that had like low socialization or these sorts of factors that we were talking about, is there, what would be the scenario? Because I often think in terms of co-regulation. I'm like, okay, if there was, say, a horse that I had that was really grounded, really settled in themselves, really kind of knew themselves and was able to co-regulate and anchor potentially a horse that was socially having a bit of a challenge, would that be, sort of a way you would recommend to start an integration process with that horse?
It could be, definitely. We do need to be mindful that depending on the amount of deficit that the horse that's struggling has, and the age of the horse, it can be really hard just learning how to then engage with that really grounded, steady horse, because they may literally not know the communication that happens between horses. So they've absolutely missed out on all of that. And it would be great to be able to integrate them, but still being mindful of that we might run into situations where that horse is still struggling to figure out how to just get by in a pasture with another horse. It might still be causing them stress just to be in in freedom with another horse in a pasture.
Mm,
In some situations I have seen that, where horses are so,
yep.
they have been so severely under socialized that it's, even in a big pasture, just the proximity of others can still be stressful for them.
Yeah, and I've seen that as well, even in a barn type scenario, in a stall type scenario, where they need, you know, there's often a bigger spatial bubble, for example, with humans and horses, for some of these horses, where they need that time and that sort of down regulation space, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and thinking about, how we often design barns and paddocks and things like that, sometimes horses can't even get away from other horses. If we think about stalls, let's say, where there's, and it would be great to have a stall where, let's say, we have bars
Yeah.
between so that horses can see other horses, but sometimes those horses that are then in the stall, they can't get away from the other horse. And so they might be eating their hay in the corner, but they're constantly aware that they can't make their bubble any bigger. They
Yep.
can't get further away because they're in a 12 by 12 box. And so is that horse next to them. So that horse next to them could be continually, sending signs that they want them to move or something like that. And they literally can't.
They
They can't
can't.
get any farther away,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I've wondered that too, because like the tendency is, say, which is a human convenience, to kind of feed horses, like, say we have a stall barn and then we're feeding them all kind of in the same spot, where, yeah, there is that sense of, if a horse had choice, that they might go and eat somewhere really different, or
Yeah. Yeah.
find a different space for, I'll often encourage people, hey, if it's a possibility, put not just a hay net in the stall, but something outside as well, that they can move back and forth, and also, have a different, choose a different spot to eat, if they would like to, have that extra zone, more relaxation, all of those things, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's an awesome suggestion. And when we're thinking about horses displaying aggression to one another over food, it's good to remember too that that resource guarding behavior is often human created. If we think about horses under natural conditions, if they're on a big pasture and there's a bunch of grass bit here and a bunch of grass 10 feet away, they don't fight over those piles of bunch grass. They just spread farther out because
Mm-hmm.
the resources are spread farther out. But when we manage horses, even if we put out 20 hay piles for 10 horses, we're still sometimes creating situations where we're then encouraging the behavior of just driving each other off of that hay all the time, and some people might look at that and be like, oh, my horse is the boss mare because she runs everybody off her food, when in
Right.
actuality, that horse is just the most stressed about controlling that resource.
Right, right. That's super helpful. So in lieu of that, what would your suggestion be, as far as like how you would set up that space?
Oh, I mean, again, without knowing all the details about that space,
Yeah,
it's really hard for me to say specifically, but
totally.
spreading so often the amount of resources that we're giving horses, they're not big enough,
Yeah.
that whether that's space, whether that's volumes of or piles of food, whether that's like, one access to like one water source, we're often creating these situations where those resources are just limited. And we set these situations where horses feel they need to fight to
Mm,
gain control of them. So again, without knowing the specific situations of that
yeah.
theoretical paddock, it's kind of hard to say exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
know for my girls, we're on about an acre and a half with a track. And I try to put out usually like 5 different hay nets, hay areas for them. That seems to be like, it's really amazing watching how it's settled their system to have those different spaces to take, and they'll take space, like one will go way down the end of the paddock, or right, there'll be these shifts to, being closer together and then further apart. So I do wonder if that, that's often, like you say, where it's like one hay area, and then that becomes in and of itself a resource that can be easily guarded, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Wow.
those conflict behaviors, those agonistic behaviors we call them, horses should be spending more time engaging in affiliative behaviors or
Mm-hmm.
bond building behaviors than they should be engaging in behaviors meant to like, you know, challenge one another.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that oftentimes when we have, correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be, and maybe comes from, I don't know, like just what we see out in our world, or whatnot, this sense of, oh, those conflictual behaviors being kind of normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. They've been normalized. Aggression between horses has been normalized.
Yeah.
Those big expressions of stress or fear have been normalized because we humans often haven't trained ourselves to be able to recognize the really small subtle signs of stress, and so it takes those big reactions from the horse before we do anything, if we do anything at all. Or we might normalize it and say, yeah, it's totally normal for horses to do that, when
Yeah.
in fact it's not. We've just normalized stress, and seeing stress and seeing that as normal.
Wow. Yeah, some light bulbs really went off for me there, just thinking back to my horse keeping practices over the years and being like, oh, goodness, where
Oh,
I kind of went into a space of like, oh, they'll work it out, which I think is what often happens, right? Like they'll sort it out between themselves. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, and no, and
Yeah.
this is actually not, yeah, healthy herd behavior, right?
No, aggression is a very costly behavior for all animals,
Yeah.
and no animal feels good when they're behaving aggressively, unless they're like trolls on the internet who like just delight in like picking on others. But otherwise, like aggression doesn't feel good. Like when we're doing it, we're not doing it because we feel good. We're doing it because we feel threatened, or we
Yep.
feel like there's going to be a loss to us, or we're trying to bring comfort to our current situation. So we really should be looking at our horses and how we keep them. And if we're seeing those signs, scratch our heads and think, what might I do differently in this situation so the horses don't feel they need to behave like this, because they don't want to behave like that.
No, they really don't. And
No,
honestly, if there is enough resources, I've seen that with my girls. It's like everything just kind of gets copacetic, like it
yeah,
settles out. And
totally.
I think I know they are much more healthy, not sending energy down that pathway of bickering, aggression, guarding, that sort of thing.
Totally, totally. And when I'm addressing a specific issue, like even if it's just something like a needle phobia, then I'm still looking at that horse's other 23 hours of the day. Like, do they have a high baseline level of stress because their 3F needs aren't being met? Because if they are, before I even start retraining, I
Mhm.
should be addressing some of that, because it's going to be hard for the horse to learn. It's going to be hard for the horse to make progress. And they're possibly in a state of chronic stress, and that's a welfare issue. And that, as part of what I do is making their welfare better as well, not just addressing, behavior problems.
Amazing. Yeah. And that leads me to another line of questioning. We're coming kind of closer to the end of our time together, but I was very, very curious about your work in, I guess, collaboration, support of with, veterinarians and different equine professionals, specifically around collaborative care. So you talking about, taking a needle, for example. I think that hearing you say that, it really backs me up to, okay, there's so many steps or sort of aspects of understanding a horse fully, even before, okay, why are they phobic of needles? What is going on there? What do we need to provide or do, or how do we support them so that is something that can be engaged in? So we'd love to hear a little bit more before we finish up today about, yeah, what that work looks like with, collaborative care, starting to implement that within sort of a a more veterinary type framework. What is that looking like for you?
Did you mean, just so I'm clear here, collaborative care with the professionals, or do you mean cooperative care?
Cooperative care.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
That's
Yeah, that's
exactly what I
okay.
mean. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So cooperative care is a relatively new concept in the animal training world. And basically, it's teaching animals that they can cooperatively engage in what it is we want them to do.
Yeah.
So they're not just standing there and taking what it is we're doing to them, but they're actively engaging in it. So for example, if we're dealing with a horse who is let's say afraid of the needle, we might teach them that they essentially start the process of getting the vaccine, and they do that by, let's say, moving forward and putting their nose on an object that's on the fence in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
and that essentially becomes like almost like a cue from them to us that tells us that we can go ahead and give them the injection. So they're basically telling us, I'm ready and you can go ahead and inject me. And then we would do the injection. Or if, like, let's say the horse they need an eye treatment, we can teach them we put our hand up and they might bring their eye closer to us. So essentially telling us, I'm ready, you can put the medication in, and then we put them in. So cooperative care is super fun to teach, and we can use it for all sorts of behaviors. If you go on YouTube, some of the zoo behavior cooperative care stuff
Oh,
is
it's so
fascinating. Like
amazing.
hippos opening their mouth,
Right?
they can get dental, and like hyenas coming up and sticking their paw through the bars of the cage so they can get blood draws. Like it's really cool to think about the possibilities of this. And as much as I love cooperative care behaviors, I'm also a big proponent of what I call considerate care. And that means that sometimes the animal might not have a choice, because we might just need to get something done. And in that moment, if we ask the animal to opt in to what it is we're doing, they might say no.
Yeah.
Then what do we do if there's a medical emergency and we need to do it? So with my needle phobic cases, for example, instead of teaching a cooperative care behavior where that animal might opt in, where that horse might opt in, instead we would take a considerate care approach where we teach the horse to stand still and tolerate the injection, but it's going to happen kind of no matter what. Not that the animal is stressed and we're going ahead and doing it, because the goal is that the animal is unstressed throughout the entire process.
Yep.
But that it's not within the animal's control to opt into that. Does that make sense, that difference?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
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 And so for you, like with the considerate care, because I'm a big proponent of, consent, especially as a body worker. I feel like, if a horse is not on board with having body work done, then, we're not really going to get very far, particularly if they're not kind of in an open space to that work. So for you, with like say considerate care, because I think oftentimes what ends up happening with say a horse needing a needle, and it becomes a fight, it becomes a major stressor, it re-amplifies or invigorates the phobia, like that sort of thing. So can you share a little bit with the considerate care, what's the practice so that is not sort of re-traumatizing, putting them into a major stress state, that sort of thing.
Totally. So when we're dealing with phobias or really strong fears or aversions to things, it's often because the horse, and it can be just one time, had a bad experience with
Yeah.
that thing. So, you take a weanling that's going to get vaccines for the first time, and let's say the veterinarian handles them roughly in that moment.
Yep.
It can literally be that one time that the horse can then, moving forward, be afraid of getting injections. And unfortunately, our brains are hardwired to remember things that are scary and traumatic,
Yeah.
and they're really, really good at it. So it can be hard to overcome those fears once they develop. So when we're thinking about horses, always super important that we're thinking about training them in ways that don't cause them to feel those unpleasant things in the first place, because those things are really hard to undo once they do them.
Yeah.
So when we're dealing with a horse who has experienced a traumatic event around something like getting vaccinations, often what we need to do initially is just reteach them that the whole process can be not stressful and even pleasant. And we do that primarily by using two techniques: systematic desensitization and counter conditioning. And when I say systematic desensitization, I'm not talking about the desensitization that you see on TikTok or YouTube, or because it's not desensitization.
No.
We're actually seeing flooding. We're seeing exposing the horse at full intensity to the thing that they're frightened of. And then we take away the thing that they're frightened of the moment they stop responding. But often in those moments when the person's taking the thing away, the horse is still terrified. They've just stopped moving, right?
Yeah. They're
Lack
going
of
into
response.
collapse.
Yeah, lack of response isn't lack of fear.
Yes.
So systematic desensitization is gradual exposure at a level that does not trigger any fear. Like no fear. It is not beneficial for us to trigger fear, and it's actually counterproductive. So we can overcome needle phobias just with that one technique alone, but something that can help kind of speed it up is something called counter conditioning. So that just means changing the animal's emotional response to the appearance of that thing. So before the needle, as soon as they saw the needle, it predicted feeling fear or pain. Instead, we change that association, and it's an involuntary association and just an involuntary response that the animal has, where now when they see the needle, they actually anticipate feeling good things or receiving a treat.
Yep.
So using those techniques, we can then work our way towards a considerate care approach, where the whole process is, the veterinarian approaches, someone's holding onto the horse's lead rope, but they're not tightly restraining them. Let's say they're doing an IV injection, the vet strokes their jugular groove and they occlude it and they inject the horse. And the whole process, the horse is not stressed. So that's what we would build towards.
Yep.
Overcoming that fear initially, and then teaching the horse how they might behave in that situation instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I want to highlight that, and I would love to have a more of a conversation down the line around this. But I think that very often, as say a horse owner, for example, how important it is to prioritize taking the time. That's really what I'm hearing is like, that we work towards this over, a number of weeks or months to make it a success for all concerned so that it's a win-win. And it takes time and yeah, building this confidence and trust. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I tell you what, it takes literally no time to do it in a way in the first place that doesn't trigger fear compared to the time it takes to overcome fear once that association has been built. It can take months and months sometimes to overcome needle phobias. And not that I don't love getting paid, but I would much rather, in the first place, that horses experience getting injections without being traumatized. That to me would be amazing if that could happen. And it really takes so little time to do that in the first place than it does to overcome that learned fear once they've learned. And this is why it's really important that people need to be so mindful of who they send their horse to for training.
Oh my gosh.
Because the industry is completely unregulated and anyone can hang their shingle out and say they are a horse trainer. And it literally can happen in one event that your horse can be traumatized about trailer loading, injections, having their feet handled,
saddling,
being stuck in your saddle,
no
matter what it is. And it's heartbreaking to me that in some rare instances, these problems can't even be solved. If you're talking about things like under saddle issues, if a horse has been badly traumatized enough, it can be impossible in some instances to overcome those issues. So people really need to be mindful of where they send their horses for training.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That's definitely one of my things that I talk about a lot, because I think that, it can be something that we don't necessarily do the research on, and we, okay, yeah, they'll be fine. And I've written articles about it because I'm like, it's so important. Yeah, totally.
And we call these behavioral injuries, and they really are no different than physical injuries. They are an injury to the horse's behavior that is going to need time and rehabilitation to overcome. If you send your horse to a trainer and that horse bows a tendon, it's going to be a road to recovery to overcome that tendon injury. And that tendon is never going to be as strong as it was before. And it's the same thing with behavioral injuries. When we injure the horse's behavior, it's going to take time to overcome, and there's always going to be the risk of relapse about that experience, about that event.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. What a strong note to close off on today. It's such an important topic, So thank you. Lauren, would you share a little bit about how people can learn more about your work or get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you for the conversation, Alexa. I feel like we could talk for like another 17 hours.
Totally. I feel that too. So good.
I'm on, my website is equinebehaviorist.ca, and I am also foolishly on TikTok. So I am a horse behavior talk on TikTok, and I'm on YouTube and Facebook as well. So if you just search my name, I'm out there being an old lady on TikTok. It's amazing.
Go you. I haven't got there yet.
Don't do it, Alexa. It's a bizarre place. All the social media places are bizarre, but it's like extra bizarre.
Noted. Well, I am so appreciative of this conversation. I feel like there was just so many nuggets of goodness that we got into today. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and doing the work that you do in the world, Lauren. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Alexa. And thank you for having me on. This truly was a pleasure, and I hope we can do it again.
Oh, definitely. Oh, well, I want to thank all the listeners out there. I hope you learned a thing or two with us today, and I'll look forward to seeing you for the next episode. Bye for now, everybody. Hi everyone, it's my favorite time of the year. It's apprenticeship time and we begin in 2 months. The whole horse apprenticeship is a 6 month equine wellness immersion, and it's a whole lot more than that. There is 24 guest instructors, 4 online courses, weekly posts, lots of other connections, spaces, and an amazing community of horse people from all over the world that continue to gather each year, some for upwards of 6 years now, for this program. That's really, really special. It's a chance for you to connect more deeply with yourself, with your horses, with your land, and generally to shift the way that you're being with your horses in the ways that work for you. So I hope you will consider joining us. You can head to www.alexalinton.ca/whole-horse-apprenticeship to learn more. We start on September 15th.